A stranger in a trench coat stares out a rain-soaked window, says nothing, and something inside you answers like it was called by name. Your eyes burn. You swallow. You pretend you're just tired. Your screen goes black. Your room doesn't change. Your life is still sitting right there like an unpaid bill, and yet you feel like someone just left you, like a door closed, like a presence walked out of your nervous system and didn't even say goodbye. This is the part people joke about. I cried over a cartoon, they'll say, laughing like it cancels it out. But the laugh is a mask, because the truth is more unsettling. You can grieve someone who never existed, not as a metaphor, not in a kinda sorta way, in a real bodily way. Salt water, chest pressure, the whole animal package. And if you think that's embarrassing, you're missing the darker thing. The darker thing is that your emotional system doesn't require reality. It requires meaning. Let's say the quiet part out loud. Your brain doesn't run on facts, it runs on models. A model is just a living prediction of the world. Who is safe, who is dangerous, who matters, who can leave you, who can hold you together. Your nervous system is basically a paranoid accountant, tracking losses and gains in a ledger you can't see. Now here's where it gets weird. A fictional character is technically an empty name, a label with no physical referent. Sherlock Holmes, Gojo, Walter White, that heroine who always shows up when the world is collapsing. These names don't point to a person you can meet at a cafe. They point to nothing. And yet the name isn't empty inside you. Inside you it's loaded. It's packed like a suitcase. It's filled with expressions, sacrifices, jokes, betrayals, moral lines, soft moments, the way they look away when they're trying not to feel. The problem of empty names is a philosophical splinter. How can you have real emotions about something that isn't there? But the more honest question is, how could you not? Because your mind was never designed to care only about what is physically present. If it did, love wouldn't survive long distance. Grief wouldn't survive funerals. Memory wouldn't hit you in a grocery store aisle because you saw a cereal box that reminded you of someone who used to eat it. You don't just respond to reality, you respond to representation. And representation, when it's crafted well, is not a weaker version of reality. It's a concentrated version, like a shot of espresso compared to a mug of watery coffee. Fiction doesn't compete with your real life on the grounds of factual existence. It competes on the grounds of emotional truth. That's why you can watch a series and feel more understood than you do in a room full of people who actually exist. Because those people are messy in the wrong ways. They misunderstand your tone. They talk past you. They bring their own needs like luggage they refuse to carry. Fictional characters, meanwhile, are engineered to land. They are curated into coherence. They are shaped by writers who understand pacing, tension, revelation. They are made to be legible. Real humans are a raw data stream. Fictional humans are edited footage, and edited footage can hit harder than raw life ever does. You're on the couch, one hand in a bag of something salty, scrolling your phone with your thumb during a slow episode. Then a character says one line, just one, and your thumb stops moving. You don't even breathe right for a second. Your eyes lock, your face changes. Because that line wasn't for the scene, it was for you. That's not magic. That's your brain doing what it always does, pattern matching. When a character mirrors something buried in you, fear of abandonment, hunger for recognition, the desire to be chosen, your nervous system lights up like it found a familiar address. This is where parasocial relationships enter, and people use the word like an insult. Parasocial sounds clinical, like a disorder you caught from Wi-Fi. But it's not automatically unhealthy. It's a description, a one-sided bond where you feel connected to someone who doesn't know you. Historically, you had parasocial bonds with myths, saints, heroes, legends. Now you have them with streamers, actors, fictional characters, and that one anime protagonist who keeps choosing the hard right thing when you can barely choose what to eat. The bond is one-sided, yes, but the feeling is not fake, because feelings don't ask for a two-way handshake to exist. Feelings are internal events. They happen because your brain decides something is relevant to survival, identity, or belonging. And fictional characters can become relevant in all three. Survival, they model danger and protection. Identity, they show you who you could be or who you're afraid you already are. Belonging, they offer a consistent presence, a predictable emotional rhythm, a kind of companionship that doesn't interrupt you mid-sentence. A fictional character can be the safest relationship you've ever had, precisely because they can't touch your life, they can't judge you, they can't ghost you, they can't expose you to your friends. They can't disappoint you in the random mundane ways real people do, like forgetting your birthday or making everything about themselves. They are a controlled dose of intimacy. And that's the paradox. The unreal thing can be emotionally cleaner than the real. Now, philosophers have wrestled with this in different costumes. Some call it fictional realism, the idea that fiction can deliver truths about human experience, even if the events never happened. Others call it suspension of disbelief, like you're temporarily turning off logic as a party trick. That's not what happens. Your brain doesn't need to fully believe something is fact to respond emotionally. It only needs to treat it as a meaningful simulation. You don't have to believe the bear is in the room to feel your heart race when you see it on screen. Your body is ancient. It responds first. It asks questions later. This is where the neurological part gets almost rude. The emotional difference between a real person and an imaginary person can approach zero in the circuits that matter most for feeling. Because the circuits that generate emotion are not truth detectors, they're relevance detectors. Your limbic system isn't sitting there with a philosophy degree going, "Excuse me, that character is ontologically fictional, therefore we shall not cry." It's more like, "This pattern means loss. Loss is dangerous. Activate the mourning package." Your brain runs on prediction and embodiment. When you watch someone's face crumple on screen, your mirror systems, networks that help you internally simulate what you observe, can recreate a version of that state inside you. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to tighten your chest. Enough to make your throat swell. Enough to make your eyes wet. Empathy is a simulation engine. It doesn't require a real person in front of you. It requires cues. Eyes, voice cracks, silence at the wrong time, a hand shaking. A character trying to be brave and failing in a way that looks exactly like how you fail. Your body reads that like a language it already spoke before words. And that's why the phrase "empty names" is so haunting. Because the name is only empty in the physical world. In your mind, it's a container full of lived sensation. You didn't meet them, but you spent hours with them. You didn't touch them, but you tracked their micro-expressions. You didn't share a life, but you shared a story. And stories are not small. Stories are one of the oldest survival technologies we have. They teach without bleeding. They let you practice pain without paying the full price. They give you a virtual nervous system rehearsal for real life. A good story is like a controlled burn in a forest. It prevents a bigger fire later, sometimes, but sometimes it becomes the forest. You finish a long series. The last episode ends. The music swells, the final shot lingers. Then the streaming platform autoplays something else, bright and stupid, like it's trying to disinfect you. You stare at the screen with a weird emptiness behind your ribs. Not the actor, not the franchise, not the merchandise. You want the specific emotional ecosystem you just lived in. That emptiness isn't childish. It's biological. Your brain had been receiving a steady rhythm of social cues, faces, voices, narrative tension, resolution, connection. Even if it's one-sided, it still feeds your social appetite. When it suddenly stops, your system notices the absence like a missing tooth. Your mind keeps reaching for the character the way your tongue keeps reaching for the gap. This is why people rewatch things. Because they miss the relationship. And here's the twist. The trapdoor moment. You're not crying for a fictional character. You're crying for the part of yourself you were allowed to feel while watching them. That's the secret most people don't want to admit, because it exposes how starved they are. With certain characters, you become softer, or braver, or more honest, or more willing to hope without immediately mocking yourself for it. They give you access to emotions you ration in real life, because the world punishes you for having them. In public, you have to be efficient. You have to be fine. You have to keep your tone professional. You have to package your pain in acceptable language and schedule it between meetings. But in fiction, you can feel the whole thing without consequences. No one asks you to justify it. No one tells you to be rational. No one weaponizes your vulnerability later. So when the character suffers, you don't just mourn them. You mourn the version of you that was open. When the character leaves, you don't just lose them. You lose a doorway. That's why it hurts like it's real. Because the loss is real, not the loss of a person in the world, the loss of an inner atmosphere. And this is where parasocial relationships become a mirror with the lights off. Sometimes we bond with fictional characters because real relationships are risky. Not just emotionally risky, identity risky. Real intimacy can rearrange your life. It demands negotiation. It exposes your contradictions. It forces you to admit needs you'd rather keep hidden. Fiction offers intimacy without negotiation. It's like having a houseplant that gives you oxygen, but never asks you where you've been. So the problem of empty names is also a problem of modern life. We are surrounded by humans, yet starving for connection that feels safe. We live in a world where you can message someone instantly and still feel alone for weeks. A world where a dating app can show you a buffet of faces and still make you feel like an unchosen product on a shelf. A world where everyone is branding themselves, even in their friendships, like they're afraid of being seen unfiltered. Fiction cuts through that. A character doesn't perform a personal brand, they perform a story. And stories are the oldest form of emotional honesty we have. Now, to keep this from turning into a gloomy sermon, we need an exit. Not a cheesy one, not touch grass, not just make friends. Real shifts, small ones, strategic ones. First shift. Stop insulting your own nervous system. If you cry for fictional characters, it doesn't mean you're weak. It means your empathy hardware still works in a world that constantly tries to dull it. Instead of shame, use curiosity. Ask yourself, what exactly hit me? Was it abandonment, loyalty, sacrifice, being seen? A character choosing you when no one else did? Name the emotional truth you reacted to. Because once you name it, you can stop outsourcing it entirely to fiction. You can start looking for it in life, not as a dramatic arc, but as a small daily nutrient. Second shift, build an attention budget the way you build a money budget. Your attention is not a spiritual concept. It's a resource that shapes what your brain believes is important. If you spend 8 hours a week bonding with fictional characters, your brain is practicing relationship in a place where you can't be reciprocated. That doesn't make it bad, it makes it powerful. Powerful things deserve boundaries. So don't try to quit stories. Just stop letting them be your only social vitamin. Pair your consumption with one real-world signal. One message to a friend, one walk where you don't bring the show with you. One moment of eye contact with the cashier instead of treating them like scenery, because your brain learns what relationship is from repetition. And repetition is a teacher that doesn't care if the lesson is healthy. Third shift, take what the character gave you and turn it into a behavior, not a daydream. This is where people get stuck. They admire a character's courage or softness or integrity, and then they keep it in a glass case like a museum exhibit. Don't do that. Translate it into one action small enough to be real. If the character made you feel protected, create protection in your environment. Clean your space, lock your boundaries, remove one app that feeds your grey fog. If the character made you feel seen, practice being seen in a low-stakes way. Say the honest sentence instead of the polished one at least once this week. If the character made you feel brave, choose one discomfort on purpose. A conversation you've avoided, a task you keep postponing, an apology you keep rehearsing in your head, but never send. Fiction is emotional truth, but emotional truth isn't meant to stay trapped behind a screen. It's meant to leak into your life like ink in water, tinting the way you move. Otherwise, the connection becomes a beautiful cage. Here's the last micro scene. You're in a crowded place, train, cafe, office elevator. Everyone is doing the modern posture, face neutral, eyes down, pretending to be independent islands. You think about the character you loved, the one who would have noticed, the one who would have said the right thing, or stood in front of you when the world felt sharp. And for a second, you feel that old ache. The unreal person felt more real than the real ones. But then you catch something. The ache isn't proof that reality is empty. It's proof that you're capable of depth. And depth is rare now. Which means you have a choice. Keep feeding that depth only in places that can't answer back. Or start planting it, awkwardly and imperfectly, in a life where it might. That's the real paradox. Not that you cried for someone who doesn't exist, but that something inside you exists so intensely, it's willing to love a name that points to nothing, just to feel alive. So here's the question I want you stuck with. The one that doesn't let you scroll away comfortably. Which fictional character did you grieve the hardest? And what part of you were they quietly replacing?